Hey, folks, good morning and welcome to another episode of Steelers Morning Rush. I'm Alan Saunders. It is Tuesday, August 27th. Today is NFL Cutdown Day. Teams must have their rosters at 53 players by 4 p.m. I'm sure the Steelers are probably making some moves while I'm recording this a little bit late this morning, as we've already had some news come through early in the day that Terrell Edmunds, former Steelers strong safety, is been cut loose by the Jacksonville Jaguars. All kinds of moves already being made across the NFL. And, of course, the Steelers made 11 moves on Monday, releasing a whole bunch of players that I don't think anyone was really surprised by. Matthew Wright, I guess, the kicker. I thought maybe there was a chance the Steelers would be able to find a trade for him. That was the only one in that group that really surprised me at all. But even then, I didn't think there was any chance of him unseating Chris Boswell and making this team. We'll be keeping up with the news throughout the day. Crazy day today up until the 4 p.m. deadline. And then after, usually, there's still more moves that'll happen tomorrow and the practice squad. And then, throughout the week, really, there's still a whole bunch over and over again. There's guys that make this initial 53 and then aren't there for that week one game. So, just because you're there at 4 p.m. today doesn't mean your spot is safe. But what I really want to talk about today is the wide receiver position. We broke some news here yesterday that the Steelers have been in contact with the Houston Texans about John Metchie and the Denver Broncos about Tim Patrick. I don't know the level of interest. I don't know what the ask was from those teams and if the Steelers are even remotely considering meeting it. But I think it's, it brings up an interesting question, and it's whether or not it's worth it for the Steelers to make a small move at wide receiver. Obviously, we spent all offseason about them talking about Brandon Aiyuk, the big move, right? You get Brandon Aiyuk, and you immediately become a pretty good wide receiver room, being able to add Aiyuk to George Pickens, sort of then make Van Jefferson the third outside guy and let Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin compete for inside touches. That seems like a pretty good mix. And without a guy like Aiyuk, it doesn't feel like any of the rest of these players that might be available, whether it's Patrick or Metchie or one of the Green Bay Packers wide receivers like Grant Dubose that me and Smitty talked about the other day, or someone else that might get cut from another team. I think one of the commenters mentioned Carolina as an example, that they have too many guys as well. Sure, there's lots of good receivers out there that could add to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they are not going to fix this receiver room. Metchie is a former second-round pick, and he's not going to fix this receiver room. There just are not enough talented players out there that I think are going to be available that are going to turn this wide receiver room from a negative into a positive. I just don't see it. DK Metcalf, a bunch of people brought up yesterday. I see no reason why the Seahawks will trade DK Metcalf this offseason or ever. It's not a very good NFC. They should feel like they're in line for a playoff spot. I have no idea why they would be considering trading DK Metcalf. If they're going to trade one of their receivers, it would be Lockett, but it doesn't make any sense for it to be now. They just restructured his contract this offseason. Maybe if they're struggling at the trade deadline, that's something to circle back to, but I just don't see it. And I don't see anybody else out there that is a real needle mover being available to the wide receiver position. So does that mean the Steelers should just be Aiyuk or bust? We talked about this the other day. Or should they try to make one of these smaller moves? Is it worth it to bring in a John Metchie if they're able to make that move, or someone else, Xavier Hutchinson, Grant Dubose, someone like that? And I think the two parts of this that are getting complicated now is, and as I made in my final 53-man roster projection at SteelersNow.com today, I've got Scotty Miller on this team because he's become the best-looking punt gunner of the group that they have. And honestly, Des Fitzpatrick might be the next best. And if they're using a wide receiver as a punt gunner and they're using Calvin Austin as a punt returner, that's two spots they're tied up in special teams wide receivers. So Roman Wilson's going to make the team. Van Jefferson's going to make the team. George Pickens is going to make the team. Even if they keep 6 wide receivers, which I don't have them doing on my initial 53 right now, even if they find a way to keep 6 wide receivers, there definitely is not room for 2 additions. There isn't room for a Metchie or a Dubose. Well, Dubose is a gunner. But if that first addition is not a special teamer, if it's Metchie or if it's Tim Patrick, then there is not room for another one. And so I think that's really the key here, is that the Steelers are going to add 2 wide receivers. One of those 2 has to be a special teamer. They can't add 2 non-special team wide receivers. So Metchie, to me, sort of precludes a Brandon Aiyuk deal. Now, Grant Dubose wouldn't. That would just be bumping Scotty Miller off the roster. Grant Dubose is a very good special teams gunner, had that role for Green Bay in the past. So I think that's where I'm at with this. Now, should the Steelers pass up on another move because they're still waiting for Brandon Aiyuk? man, that's a tough decision. And I think that's one that Omar Khan's going to have to make and he's going to have to live with. I'm not sure there's a right or wrong answer to that. Obviously, the 49ers want to drag that process out as long as possible. They want the Steelers to get bored and go find some other move somewhere else so Aiyuk loses the rest of his leverage and he will have basically no choice but to sign the deal that the 49ers are offering. Will Omar go along with that? I don't know. I don't know that Metchie is a big enough prize to make losing out on Aiyuk worth it. And the reason for that is, and I've talked about this maybe here, maybe on the afternoon drive as well, is the trade deadline is still a viable option for the Steelers. Remember, their first half of the schedule is very light. They're trading draft capital anyway. If you give some teams some time to get halfway through this season and things aren't going the way they're looking, Seattle's struggling. Maybe the New York Giants are struggling. Darius Slayton becomes available. Maybe the Denver Broncos are struggling. Not maybe. The Denver Broncos are going to be struggling, and maybe they realize their error that they should have traded Courtland Sutton in the offseason and figure it out come week 8 or something like that. I think, to me, that is the big reason why Omar can be patient and wait out the 49ers on Aiyuk, because I think they're more likely to get an impact player at the trade deadline than they are right now. None of the rest of these guys move the needle for me enough to sacrifice the groundwork they've laid and their chance right now of landing Brandon Aiyuk. So I think the Steelers are going to hold off on these minor moves, wait and see what happens with Aiyuk. If it turns out they don't get him, they'll re-engage for the trade deadline and go from there, and look for a wide receiver who can be an upgrade both in terms of the wide receiver 4-5 job and special teams gunner. They absolutely need that. A guy like Grant Dubose from Green Bay would be perfect. I'm sure there are some other options out there as well. That's it for today. Got a busy day, so I got to run. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll have more with me and Zachary Smith on the afternoon drive just after the Steelers make their cuts at 4 p.m. today. So stay tuned for that. Like, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel so you don't miss a thing. From me, Smitty, the rest of the Steelers Now team. And if you're listening somewhere else, make sure to leave us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or any other podcasting apps. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.